What's up, you beauties? Welcome to HW 3.38. I'm Jim, and I'm joined, as always, by the host of our hit show, Full Circle, Jack Smith. Kyle has the night off to attend to some fatherly duties. Little Kyle isn't feeling well, so we hope you feel better, little guy. If you're not listening to us live, please make sure to subscribe, follow, and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Spreaker. Quick shout out to our affiliate sites, fullpresscoverage.com and bellyupsports.com. Belly Up Sports recently updated their site. Go check it out during our episode. They have everything you need when it comes to sports. They do what the others don't. And while you're listening to our episode, check out our site, hwhockey.net. Check out our power rankings and our playoff predictions. There were a couple of surprise picks in there, and maybe we'll get to some of those later on in the show. But first and foremost, let me introduce our guest for the hour, one of the coolest guys we've had the pleasure of hanging out with on the show, and we're glad to have him back, Mr. Jason Myrtetus. Let me just get back into the chat here. Jason, how's it going, man? Thanks for hanging out with us.
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
Doing okay.
Doing all right, all things considered.
Boy, it sounds like you guys have considerably dropped your meter on cool.
Nah, man. Dude, we're stoked to have you on. I mean, of course, we're going to talk about the Flyers. It was the last time we had you on, I think it was, I went back and looked, October 2019. So that was, I think it was the week of Alain Vigneault's first season with the Flyers. Everything we know went pretty well last year until the playoffs came. Obviously, we want to talk to you about this year.
Holy cow. It's been since the first week AV coached the Flyers. Where you guys been? Like, come on.
I know.
Got me on the pay no mind list.
You've been busy. Dude, since we last had you on, you've done some pretty big things.
No.
Yeah. With the FBN network, you're back on the radio, dude. Congratulations for that. We loved listening to you all year.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. So a busy year for you. I have a lot of questions I want to ask you because you get paid to be around the team, and obviously we love the team, but I want to know, like, as someone in your position, I'm just going to ask you right off the bat. I know you're a straight shooter. You're an honest guy. How hard was this season for you to go through?
Yeah, well, it was different, just obviously from the standpoint of, the access that and the way I do my job was a lot different because usually there's a room off the tunnel where the Flyers go down behind their bench. It's called NBA 1. It's the visiting NBA locker room. And that's where I work out of in a normal year. So when, I don't know who I'm going to get at an intermission until they turn that corner. I request guys, but you never know. So, that's it. And that's kind of halfway down that hallway to the locker room, which is just to the right of that. So, so I'm used to working in there, but this was different. I was working in the press box in the regular radio booth with our engineer, Betsy, who engineers our games. And then in the booth right next to me was Tim Saunders and Steve Coates. So it was different to be up there for the entirety of the games, the home game broadcasts. And I did all the road games from right here in the home studio, which was awesome. And I love that part of it. So it's a different, and obviously the environment was different and all the elements were different. And, a lot of when I'm downstairs working down there, I see a lot of things and hear a lot of things that a lot of people don't get because I'm kind of beyond the velvet rope, the kind of players and coaches area where I work. So it gives me a lot of context and stuff like that. And I have a lot of conversations just when, before the players line up in the hallway before warm up, I'll talk to some guys and just, when I'm in there getting ready for the broadcast, there's a massage room that's set up in the coach's room back in that NBA 1 locker room. A lot of guys are kind of bopping through, can walk around, talk to some players, talk to coaches and stuff like that. So I missed a lot of that element of it. And we were a little bit more disconnected. But to kind of answer your question, I mean, there were nights when I wanted to post the job on Monster and not do the postgame show. When they lose 9-0 and then they come back and lose 8-3 to the Rangers the next time. Like, I mean, it's tough. Like I'm working for the team and I'm working for the broadcast that they air, but I have to be critical. And it's hard to kind of tamp down your emotion when you see some things repeating and the frustrations mount. And it's something where you just got to go, okay, I just got to remain professional. I got to be able to deliver this message, but not in a way that is how I want to deliver it. What the F, and go nuts, like what is going on? And it's hard to do because there is emotion involved and we're vested, right? I was a fan of this team growing up. I grew up here. It's why I fell in love with the sport. I became a goalie because I saw Bernie Perrant's mask, and you can see it on the wall behind me. So all those things. I have history, and since being in the media, try and kind of remove emotion from the equation. But that's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do. And I want to see the team succeed, not because, I want to go along for the ride. That's part of it. But I want to see these fans get paid off, and to see with the regression and step backwards this year after what we saw the year prior, it was really frustrating. But we did the best we can from a broadcast standpoint. It wasn't perfect, but it was different, no doubt.
Man, we don't envy you at all. I mean, it was hard enough for us to come on here and talk about the same exact blowout after the same exact embarrassing blowout. And it was like, how do you lose 9-0? You go up 3-0 on a team, let them come back, you pull off the win, and then you get blown out again. It's like back to status quo for this team. Is another blowout. Like, I know you didn't see as much contact with the team as you're used to, but what was the players' demeanor, especially in the month of March? Like, it had to have been sleepwalking or something. Like it was, I can't imagine how rough it had to be on everybody.
Yeah, it was dizzying, I think, for the players too, because hockey's just like a lot of other team sports where you play a lot, and when you're playing well, you cannot play enough games, and when you're struggling, you cannot practice enough. And they didn't have that luxury when they hit that. They didn't get off to a great start from a process standpoint to the season, even though they were 11-4-3 at the end of February. It didn't look right. Like, we knew, like, this doesn't look right. And you're going, okay, this is the sign of a good team though, right? You're not playing your best hockey and you find ways to win. You get timely goaltending, you get some timely scoring, and good teams find ways to win. Bad teams find ways to lose, right? Well, that didn't turn out to be the case because they took the nosedive, and obviously what happened from February 7th on was a big part of that as well. I think there's a few guys that just weren't right after COVID. There were some guys that bounced back, and some guys just battled really hard, and I think some other guys didn't battle hard enough. But as it was going on, I know that in talking to guys, both, either, taping interviews with them or, just talking with them off the record and, or texting with them, that it was tough, man, because everybody was searching for answers and they were saying the right things, but they just weren't coming up with it. It wasn't happening on the ice, no matter how much video you showed or how, little practice you got and worked on, some things. Maybe it would work as a Band-Aid, but you weren't dealing with just a scrape. You were dealing with a gushing wound that needed more than a Band-Aid. It needed surgery. It needed practice time. It needed all those things. It needed more skill on the team. It needed better cohesion in the roster. It needed goaltending when it didn't have it. The goaltending needed defense and it didn't have it. It was the confluence of so many things. And while I know a lot of people are angry about what they have said about COVID and how it kind of derailed them, and it's not an excuse, but it is a factor. It's part of the equation. It's a reality. They got hit, and a lot of the teams that got hit didn't bounce back from it. Now, some of those teams like Buffalo, they suck, but Buffalo would not have been as bad as they were had they not had it. Rasmus Ristolainen said that he was so sick that when he went to bed at night, he wasn't sure if he was going to wake up in the morning. He couldn't walk up a flight of stairs. From what I understand, he had the Brazilian variant. I'm not sure which ones the Flyers have, but is it an excuse? Hell no. And it shouldn't be treated as and let be an excuse, but it is a factor in this season. And the further condensing of the schedule certainly didn't help either. But they were flawed even before that. So let's just be honest here. They were flawed. There was no replacement for Niskanen. There was no replacement as a top pair defenseman. And that there is a fatal flaw.
Let me ask you about that, because we'll start to veer towards the makeup of this team and Fletcher. His offseason, obviously pretty underwhelming. A lot of fluff and not much bang. Kind of knew Niskanen was going to retire, and it seems like his biggest plan was a hope and a prayer he could talk him out of it. Now, there were teams that made moves. I think the biggest one that comes to mind is like Vancouver acquiring Jimmy. I'm going to get this wrong. Nate Schultz.
Nate Schmidt.
Schmidt every time.
Yeah, from Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, and now that's a guy. The reason I bring that up is because that's a guy, and we're in a dead cap, flat cap error right now, where you have to be careful with the money you spend, the dollars you give to players. Believe it's a 6-year deal at $5 million, if not $5 million. The reverse, it's a lot of money for a lot of term. I didn't want the Flyers doing something like that for a guy who I think's maybe as good as his contract, maybe not. So I understand not going out and signing a guy who's not really as good as you.
Well, he was a trade. He was a trade because he was with Vegas. He signed that contract with them. Yeah.
But the contract and the money is what we couldn't just put that on this team. Yeah. And so because free agency seemed to be our option, I'm glad they didn't go out and just sign and I know Barry's played better this year, but him to a 5-year deal at 6, because we got Seattle expansion coming up and all that. So I guess my question to you is what did you think Fletcher could have done? How well do you think he did? And how much of that do you think he put into the overall makeup of this team for the future, not just for this COVID 2021 year?
Well, I think the big thing when you're talking about salary cap is you got to take a long view of it. It's easy for us to take a short view and say, this is what the cap space he had. This is what he could have got done. This player signed here. This player signed there. You have to look at it differently than that because he has to look at it differently. That's his reality. Number one, he makes the deal for Niskanen knowing he has 2 years left. The retirement, came out of the blue. The COVID situation, had COVID never hit, Matt Niskanen, I don't think would have retired. So that's number one. And, the plan when you acquire Niskanen was sound. 2 years of Matt Niskanen as your top pairing defenseman. Then if you have a Sanheim, a Myers to move into that spot. Now you had to move to that plan a year early. So that's the one part of it. The other part of it is he's also got to look at who's coming up on restricted free agency, who's coming up on unrestricted free agency. I got Couturier, I got Hart, I got Sanheim on a bridge, I got Myers on a bridge last year. There's all these different pieces that fit together to make this puzzle of your salary cap. And there just wasn't a lot of movement in the league because of the flat cap. And teams that were planned to be cap teams, cap right against it, like the Flyers were, it changed a lot of things really quickly. So that's number one. Number two, as far as him trying to fill that void, I agree with you about Nate Schmidt. He's a nice player. That's not what you need for your top pair. And I'd rather make the right move than the wrong move quickly. You got to make the right move for the organization. And like you said, Schmidt has a lot of term. So if you're going to make the wrong move, it's going to be multiple years of pain. Not that he's a bad player, but it just didn't fit what your need was at that time. And, you look at the situation, who was out there? Okay, Pietrangelo was out there. They just couldn't do that. And Pietrangelo clearly wanted to he was either staying in St. Louis or he was going to Vegas for a couple of reasons. No tax in Vegas. Good team that can win a cup. Flyers weren't viewed at the same level as Vegas, although they were viewed very well. So you weren't going to get a guy like him. Did you want to go out and sign Torrey Krug, overpaid in St. Louis? And that's not the player you need. So you got to find, if you're going to go big on something like that, it's got to be maybe not a perfect fit, but a damn good fit. You know what I mean? So I don't know what other options he had. There just wasn't a lot of movement. And he's fallen on the sword. I don't know if you saw the article Pierre LeBrun wrote with the interview with him. And he said, I didn't do a good job. I didn't fill that void. And that ended up being their most catastrophic, fatal flaw this season because top line shredded them when the year before that wasn't the case. You controlled the Pasternak, Bergeron, Marchand line. You played the Caps 4 times. Ovechkin went pointless and was a -4 because you had a good top pair. You don't have that. They shredded you this year. And Zibanejad, do I need to say any more? That guy just feasted on him. So I don't know what else he could have done. Eric Gustafsson, obviously, he wasn't brought in to replace Niskanen. And it was a total failed experiment on both ends for both guys. I was
going to say, what exactly was he brought in for?
Yeah, he was brought in maybe, I don't know, I think Ghost was probably falling out of favor as a power play specialist, but then they realized that while he is really good offensively and gifted in that regard, he's a net negative because he's just so bad defensively. Yeah. He's just horrific defensive. How he ever played on a top pairing with Duncan Keith, I have no idea. But anyway, so you got to look at it and, what could they have done? And you got some players coming back and Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom who were out for different reasons, but were in unique circumstances. And, you got to at some point look at young players that are developing and say, okay, are they ready to take the jump? Some guys, most guys pretty much all the young players this year, with the exception of Joel Farabee, were not ready, and they either plateaued or they regressed. And that's why you have what you have. And that's why this offseason you're going to see a lot of activity.
So that's been the speculation. That's really what everybody we talk about with. I'll say somebody told us around 7, 8, 9-ish players possibly could be moved. Now, you could get away with like a backup goalie being one of them, maybe a bench player, a depth piece. It's not as bad as it sounds, but it's still a lot. Do you see 2, 3 significant players being moved from this roster?
Yeah, I do. I think that they know, like, the line kind of has been for this team, and not just Chuck Fletcher's era, but his predecessor and Ron Hextall, was don't mortgage the future. This is what we always did. We mortgaged the future. We got rid of Justin Williams. We got rid of Patrick Sharp. We got rid of all these guys before we should have, because we were impatient. We need to be patient. But now you're at the point where you got to cash in some of this organizational currency. And whether that's draft picks, which they have all of theirs, whether that's prospects not in the NHL, or whether that's young players in the NHL, you have to shape this roster into one that works. I think there's talent. There's talent, and there was talent on the roster this year, but talent's not good enough. The talent's got to work to be able to work together. And no matter how much talent you have, if it can't work together, it doesn't matter. And they have to get talent that complements each other, fits the system, fits the scheme. They got to figure out, I think one of the biggest things they got to figure out is what they are. What is the DNA? What is the identity of the franchise? There was the Broad Street Bullies and that whole thing for so long, and it was time to move on from that. But it's like they almost overcorrected the steering wheel. There's none of that now. And they are an easy team to play against because there's no accountability to the opposition. So there's got to be some of that added back in. And look at a team like Tampa. A couple years ago, they were incredible, right? 121 points in the regular season. They got bounced in the first round. They had no players that could throw it around in a playoff series, and they end up getting swept. Next year, they come back with Barclay Goodrow, Maroon. They got some size and some, dare I say, grit, and they win the cup. Yeah. Come on. It's not hard to figure out. You need that stuff. It's important. It's why Tom Wilson's such an important player, because there's accountability on the ice when he's there. Now, I would tell you that, in texting with some guys on the team now about what happened with Tom Wilson, they're like, yeah, we could use some of that.
Yeah, anybody that I've talked to has said the same thing. And what blows my mind? And right now, well, not just my mind is being blown right now. Right now, you're blowing all the analytical people's minds by talking the way you are, and saying that Barclay Goodrow and Big Rig, Pat
Blake
Maroon,
Coleman,
they're essential to winning hockey, right? They're not the guys who are gonna win you games per se, but they're essential pieces to a winning formula. And for whatever reason, people, a specific crowd, just doesn't want to believe that. And I get fired up because here you are saying the same thing. You're talking to actual players in the NHL who say the same thing. And this little crowd is telling everybody that you don't need these guys. It just blows my mind, Jason. It makes me a little bit angry sometimes.
Because their play doesn't look good on a spreadsheet. But the last time I checked at any level, the game has never been played on a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? And you can't. And there's no numbers in these equations for heart, determination, compete level. They're not in there. The thing that when you look at it, and I don't crap on analytics, they play a part, but they cannot be your religion. They can be a tool, but they don't need to be religion. And I think that some people look at it as religion, and I get it. That's their way of looking at it, and that's the analytical mind that they use. I'm not there, and the game, to me, you need those kind of players to have success. You need those kind of players to be able to, players like that make other guys on the roster feel 2 inches taller.
Yeah.
And 10 pounds stronger, and all of those things.
That's not going to show up in analytics. No,
it's not. And to answer Jack's question, though, because I think I didn't want to, you guys think I was avoiding it, but I think that I I think there will be significant change. And I don't think it's going to be, ancillary change. I think there's going to be some names that we're going to go, holy cow, that actually happened. It really happened. Because I think there's a huge pent-up demand for moves in the NHL right now amongst general managers and teams. They didn't get to do the things and reset their rosters heading into this season like they would normally get. And this year, with a couple of elements, because a 32nd team is coming in, the expansion draft will be in the rearview mirror. And also the fact that there's a lot of cost certainty now being ascertained because of the new TV agreements with Turner and with ESPN. So teams now will feel a lot more comfortable about making hockey trades, signings, moves, and all of those things. I think it's going to be a fascinating offseason because I think for all the moves we didn't get last year, we're going to get them in spades this summer.
Dude, so I'm going to pose this question to both of you guys because I'm curious. Are you excited for that, or are you a little bit afraid? Because we've seen Jekyll and Hyde seasons so far with Chuck Fletcher, right? His first year could do no wrong. Amazing first year. All the moves that the roster needed, he made, in my opinion. Second year, and it wasn't just Chuck, right? Because it was a weird year. Like we just said, there's been not really any moves made in preparation for this season. But the roster was not right from the start, and things kind of snowballed. Does what you just said excite you, or are you a little bit afraid heading into the offseason? Because who knows what he's going to do?
I'm definitely not afraid. I'm excited. I'm excited just to get back to the rhythm of a normal offseason and start in October and go into an 82. Like, I love the 82. A lot of people are like, just wake me up when the playoffs start. No, I love the whole ride. So, I can't get enough of it. But no, I'm really excited about it because the alternative is to not do anything. And then what do you have to lose at this point? There needs to be change. There needs to be some significant change. And I think it was really interesting because Chuck talked about it when I had him on right after the trade deadline. He talked about it in his availability, that they were going to use that period from the trade deadline to the end of the season when pretty much they weren't mathematically eliminated yet, but they knew it. They're not idiots. And he knew that they weren't making the playoffs, that they were going to look to see who was part of the solution and who was part of the problem. And that period of time when you're not playing for anything technically in the standings, that's when professionals need to show up. Mm-hmm. And if you're not part of the solution, then we got to find a way to get you out of here because we need solution guys here. We don't need guys that aren't going to play the game the right way, that aren't going to play the game like professionals on and off the ice in preparation. I think there was a lot of that this year, based on comments from Sean Couturier and Alain Vigneault and everybody else. There were some guys not doing the right things and handling their craft like a professional. And you, in that league, you have to every night or you're dead. And they were dead. And that's what happened.
And I can't say anything. I could completely agree. I'm excited too. Full 82 guy as well, especially those West Coast trips to get to stay up. Game starts at 10 o'clock.
Flyers late night.
Yeah, well, during a regular game, wife's like, second intermission, take the trash out. I'm like, yeah, she's not even awake for those West Coast games. I got nothing to worry about. It's all me.
When you got kids, they're great too because everybody's like tucked away. You're like, oh,
I do now. This will be my first season coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. But could it, as far as change, am I scared? 2%? Really, there needs to be so much change with this team. I'm looking forward to it, much like Jason is. You have to. It's
like a nervous anxiety.
Yeah.
You need it, but it's like, oh boy, what's it going to look like when we're done?
Yeah, right. It almost feels like we have two first round picks in the top 10 or something. They could be a bad pick, sure, but we're going to get some players that are highly rated. Something big's going to change, and I'm really looking forward to that. And it has to change.
Consequential.
Yeah.
We're at a crossroads right now.
Yeah.
It's like shit or get off the pot here, right? And I think the way I've kind of termed it, it's like this is Chuck took over in season for Hextall, then he made the moves getting AV, and then he has a flat cap. But now it's time for him to put his fingerprints on this organization. I know a lot of people are really scared by that because they don't believe in Chuck. But I think he's got a lot of tools at his disposal. He's a smart man. And he's grown up in hockey. His father's a Hall of Famer, Cliff Fletcher. So I think this is going to be a very aggressive offseason. Could it blow up in their face? Absolutely. It always can. because you don't know how players are going to mix. But I'm excited for it because I want to be rejuvenated. And I mean, there's a lot of questions, like you guys said. I mean, the top pair thing, they need the grit to add to their lineup. They need to figure out who's going to Seattle and how much money they can free up so they can be bigger players in free agency and the trade market. What's happening around the league? Seth Jones, is he going to re-sign in Columbus? If not, they got to trade him. Are you in that conversation? If Dougie Hamilton reaches free agency, are you in that conversation? You pick up one of those type of guys. Now, 4 of the boxes that you deem very, very catastrophic if you don't check them going into next year, one player can check 4 of those boxes. One of those 2 guys. You know what I mean? Top pair, 24-minute a night, top line defender. Right shot, right side to play along with Provorov. Power play, penalty kill, physicality. I mean, look at a guy. Look at some of those guys. Like, look at Dougie Hamilton, 6'4", 225. Tell me you don't need size? And that guy's a great player? It's perfect. And now all of a sudden, your list of boxes starts to shrink and get a lot smaller.
I feel like Dougie would be a guy that
get better as well, because that was
it helps your goalie.
Yeah.
Oh, it totally helps your goaltending. It's your environment.
Absolutely. And I did want to transition to that a little bit, because as we all know, you're a goalie as well. And how much does that horrific defense, I know Hart didn't play good, but the confidence is a really real thing. And how much is that horrible defensive play where he's starting games off down 2-0 because the other team was on a 2-0 and he's really got no chance. And then he starts letting in softies. And then as the season progresses, now almost everything's a softie. He can't buy a save. He'll get a shutout against Buffalo, but the next 2 games are blowouts. How did that weigh on Hart? Do you think it was just him having a bad season? Was it because of this defense? A lot of people say goaltending is our biggest need, and I don't agree with that. I think it was the complete horror show that the defense was first. So where are you with all that in Carter Hart?
Yeah, the chicken or the egg, right? What came first? Was it the goaltending that broke down and the defense looked bad, or was it the other way around? I got news for you, and I'm as certain as my fat ass is sitting here that it was the other way around. The goaltending was off to a good start. And despite the fact that they were giving up through the end of February, the 3rd most high danger chances in the league, and they were still getting goaltending. But is that sustainable? No. And when it breaks down that often and eventually it gets on top of you and you don't have periods to reset, it's really difficult on a goalie. And the reason why it is look at this is a great parallel with Carson Wentz. Last year, in the beginning of the season, they couldn't protect him to save their keister. So he was running around. He was getting sacked more than anybody. Then eventually they figured out protection for a little bit, but he was still running around like he was being pressured. It was the phantom pressure and throwing the ball away, thinking he was about to get sacked when he wasn't, because he was so mentally scarred by his environment. And the same thing happens with a goaltender. And I'll point to a specific game because they played Boston, and Boston scored 3 goals in the game, all 3 in the early part of the game, backdoor on his blocker side. All right. The 4th goal that they score is Brad Marchand from just inside the top of the circle, snapshot short side. Now, why is that? Because the dude just got touched up 3 times on the back door, so he's got leaning. He knows that coverage is not there. They've gotten him on it before, and if you lean a half an inch in the NHL, they make you pay. It's unforgiving. And Marchand saw him slightly off his spot, and boom, he touches him up there. And then the confidence wanes. And, when confidence wanes as a goalie, it's weird because you play these games, mental games as a goalie. And I've talked to Carter about this a lot because he's very cerebral in this sense. The net starts to look bigger when you turn around. Your body feels smaller. You start to play deeper, so you are smaller. And all of those elements, and he just couldn't get back on top of it, and the environment just kept breaking down. So it just kept solidifying bad habits and bad elements of his play reads and all that. And it eventually came time to just give him a break and let him practice. So I think the first part was the D. I mean, the breakdowns weren't just little breakdowns. They were glorious breakdowns.
Yeah.
You're going you guys are NHL players. Why are we flooding the ice 5 guys on one side when they have 2 forwards there? You're going, you saw some of the pictures that went around on social media. What is this? You don't do that. where's the coverage? Where's the structure? And it wasn't there. And all the video the coaching staff can show, but it doesn't matter unless you get on the ice and do it. And they didn't do it. So while I'm concerned about the goaltending, because I'm always concerned about it because it means so much, I think he's going to be fine, provided they bring structure back to their play and they bring in a top pairing defender to go out there and give you a really calm shift when you need it. And they didn't have it last year.
Yeah,
what you're saying is they're not being coached to play that way. They're just doing it.
Well, that's the other thing. A lot of people are like freaking out about AV. I'm going, okay, do you think that all of a sudden, like, do you think he was telling them to flood one side of the ice?
Exactly.
You know, were we telling a guy, Ivan Provorov, on a 2-on-1 to try and take the guy and the pass and by virtue do neither? No, he's not. Like Provorov should know, but when confidence wanes for one person, it wanes for all, right? And you know, when they're on a 2-on-1, I remember watching it. I'm going, oh my God. And I was texting Bush and I'm like, why is he not just taking the pass away? Just give him the shooter, let Carter come out, make himself big and go, all right, fucker, beat me. Right. And that's fine. You go, if he beats you, you go, okay, good. Tip of the cap to you. You beat me. But I can't get beat because you give up that pass and it makes it impossible for me to make a save. So, you know, you look at those things and you're going, what is going on here? And from guys that are usually more reliable, like Provorov. So, you know, those things can happen. The coach is not coaching that, but, you know, they can't go out there and skate the shift for them. They got to do that. They're pros. Coach's job's not to get players ready to play a game when it starts. That's on the players. They're pros. Like, these guys didn't just step out of being an accountant onto an NHL ice and don't know how to start a game.
Who was
like,
just
you're
quoted
pros
as saying that? It wasn't. Didn't someone just say that? Was it Dave Scott that said that in a Sam Carchidi article? I can't. Didn't he say something like it's the coach's responsibility to make sure the team's ready to play? Something.
Yeah, from
like
a strategic standpoint, I agree with him, but not from an emotional and energy standpoint and being ready to play the game.
Correct.
No.
I think that was what was so jarring about this year as well. I know COVID and all and short schedule, but when this team was playing well in 2019, 2020, really right before the playoffs, everything was going well. We were seeing a lot of the Dave Hacksaw tendencies this year with the very slow starts to games. You know, going down 2-3 goals in two goals in the first period, second period, all of a sudden it's 5-0 and all that. And that's where a lot of the coach talk came from. Like, oh, these guys aren't ready to play again. It's like they reverted back to the previous coach. And a lot of us fans are at the point now where, like, either it's the players or it's the coach. You can't just have this coach carousel and something's going to change. Now we're at the point where some of these core players got to change. And I've been asking this of everybody, and we're expecting major changes right now. Are there certain players on this team that they've been here for a while and they just need to go? And it also makes sense from a salary cap standpoint. And if I danced around it enough, I'm just going to say it, like a guy like Jake Voracek.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jake was your number one point guy, right? It's crazy to think, you know, he's the guy that led your team in points. And with Jake, you know, I said this on, I think I was doing on one of my episodes of the podcast. I said this the other day. If I came down from Mars and I went to all the Flyers fans and I said, tell me about this Jake Voracek. I know nothing about him, right? I've never seen him play. I've never looked at his stats, nothing. I would think that in the 964 games, I believe it is, that he's played, that he's got about 311 points. And all of them meaningless, right?
Call garbage time.
Yeah. But the ironic part about that is that in those 900 games, he's got about 600 points, right? Now, there's risk to his game. He's a high-risk offensive player and there's a lot of creativity in his game, but that comes sometimes with making bad turnovers or mistakes. And he's an offensive player. He's never been confused as a defensive stalwart. But to your point, and I agree with you, it is time for significant change. It is time to try something different. Not try something different, do something different. And, you know, while he's been a really good player in this league and his contract with 3 years left at $8+ million is a tough one. It is. But this is where you have to use organizational assets to find a way to be able to move certain guys on. And I like Jake. I really like him. I think he's a misunderstood guy. There's nobody that's done more charity for the team than Jake Voracek and Wounded Warriors and everything. But from a hockey perspective, I think shaking it up can pay dividends. Making people uncomfortable, because this every other year thing that's happened for a decade, that's never happened in any other pro sport, is unacceptable. And you have to do something, and you can't just, move on from Michael Raffel. You can't just move on from, Robert Haig. You have to do something significant. And I think that they're prepared to do that. I think they will do that. I think AV likes Jake. And you saw the responsibility that he put on him in certain situations, and doubling and triple shifting those guys in games towards the end of the year when he didn't feel like his young guys were giving him what he needed. But I think they also recognize that they have to shake it up. And, Gostisbehere being waived was part of that. And they ultimately knew he was going to clear, but that was a message that they knew he was going to clear. What was the point of that? The point of that was minimal cap space. It was to shake up the body, to shake up the minds, because Ghost has been here a while and he's had a lot of success at the NHL level. So I think there's going to be a lot of that this year. I think two of these three players won't be here. I think Ghost, Jake, and JVR, minimum two of those three won't be here.
Wow.
Yeah, those are the three most talked about players that we discussed in this offseason that are going to go. I think if the Flyers can't make a move with Seattle to get them to take Jake straight up, I think they might just flat out take Ghost or JVR. I could see them taking either one because you could sell goals. You got a new fan base and whatnot. And that's I think
JVR's the guy too. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And he's only got 2 years left, right? It's not a huge commitment for them, where Jake's got more and more money. He's got more productivity too. But, James is a guy that I can see that being very logical, that's where Ron Francis ends up going with Seattle for the Flyers. And if they need to, do a little something to goose it along, I think they will. Yeah. You have a lot of who's untouchable, right?
At this point,
Coots maybe, Provy, Hart.
I think Provy pretty much, yeah. Hart pretty much, yeah. Cooch, yeah, but he's got 1 year left on his deal.
Interesting.
And if you're in play for a player like Jack Eichel, then that changes, right?
Are they?
I think they're going to look at it. Absolutely. I don't think there's 31 other teams that are going to look at it. The only team that's not going to look at it is going to be Buffalo, because he ain't staying. Like, they botched his situation like they botched everybody else's, but he ain't staying. He's having this neck surgery, which I'm a little leery about, but he's only 25. He's going to have a cervical disc put in a cervical spine, which is something that has not really been done a whole lot with pro athletes. It's been done with an MMA fighter who's now back fighting. It's a new procedure that he wants to have done. Buffalo does not want him to have that particular procedure done, but I think there's like a 3 to 4 month recovery period. So he probably wouldn't be ready for next year, but you're not getting Jack Eichel for just because it's October. You get Jack Eichel, he's 25 and he's a great player.
And that kind of brings up my next point when we talk about Jake, or even Coots for that matter. How old's he now? 28?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about how now this is a young man's game. All the guys doing it are 25, 26. And their whole thing about re-signing Coots, I would obviously do it, but you have to consider the price. Moving on from Jake, who's going to be 32 by the time this next season starts, is huge. Is it Seattle or bust for Jake? If they don't move him and give something to make them take him, if they say, no, we're going elsewhere, is there really any other feasible way to move him?
Yeah, because I think there's hockey trades to be made. Look at a team like Calgary.
But that's the team. That's the one team we do bring up is Calgary with their whole situation with now. How feasible do you think something like that is?
Look, I don't know if it's a great hockey trade or not. I don't. If you're going to trade Jake Voracek there and get a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, and I know everybody's always wanted Johnny Hockey here for obvious reasons, but is that really going to make them better? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Feels different. That's it.
It's different, but is it right? I don't know. These people that want Patrick Laine, I want to scream. I'm like, I get it. I see the release too. I've seen that shot from just standing at the Zamboni entrance when me and Harry went down one time. He came down to see Patrick Laine. We're standing at the Zamboni entrance, my old radio partner, Harry Mays. We're standing there in the second period, right against the glass. They're on the power play. He's set up right there where Ovechkin sets up. He gets a pass in his feet and somehow gets it off his stick with a freaking bolt of lightning, bar down, beauty. I turn around and look at Harry. He goes, I saw what I came to see. I'm out of here. Boom, he was gone. Like it's freak show, right? Like what he's able to do. But the dude, when he's not engaged, is a total mutt. Total mutt. You know, he's a net negative player.
Yeah. It's funny, the turn I've had with Line, like before the season, when we were in talks with him, before all the glaring holes this team has, he felt like, hey, he'll put us over. That's what we're missing is a goal scorer. We'll figure out defense. We have enough good young defensemen. We'll be fine. We have a stud goaltender. Seeing all the holes with this team, Line's not even in my field of view. Like we have so many other. If we were to get rid of Voracek straight up for all that money, I would hope that all $8 million would go into defense somewhere. Like honestly, it is that important to me, now. And I totally agree with Line. Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just continued to show his true colors. I don't know if you saw the comments he had about playing in the Worlds and about his season. They were, I mean, he just couldn't come off worse. He's very immature still. But as far as Coots goes, I mean, look, he's 28. He is basically at 28, exactly where Patrice Bergeron was at 28. Now, could you imagine Boston would have given up Patrice Bergeron at 28 and not gotten the 7 years they've gotten out of Patrice Bergeron? I mean, be careful.
Which is why a lot of the comments about, oh, he's comparable to Erik Karlsson being traded. I'm like, no, he's not. No.
Karlsson was off injured. Totally different.
He's one-dimensional. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say one-dimensional, but like he was getting older. It's going to fall off. This is the Coots, as you said, he's Bergeron essentially. Like this is a guy you do sign long term. Sure, he's not gonna score 5 goals in a game for you, but he's gonna prevent 5 goals. Like this is a guy who can sign that deal and last. And the one good thing about this year, and a lot of the players who need to be re-signed and signed, they're not going to make half as much as we thought they were going to make. Coots might be a different story to that, but the rest of them, Myers, Sanheim, Hart, like all their deals are probably going to be a lot more reasonable, which hopefully opens up more cap for us, make a bunch of moves. Maybe it's not as, there is a little light at the end of the tunnel, but there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking.
Yeah. And I think with Coots too, he's one of those guys that like people watch the Flyers and they say, well, they need a superstar. They don't have a superstar. And he's not a superstar. He's just a really incredibly good hockey player, but he's not flashy. I mean, he's this, French Canadian kid that doesn't say much, plays the game. So, he's a coach's dream. And I always say that when the coaching staff, things aren't going well and they're juggling lines, there's a line outside the coaching staff's door to go, put me on his line, because everybody produces with him. Right. Mm-hmm. And he takes so much responsibility off the other elements of his line because he's so good defensively and he's in the right spots and he does so many things well. And I don't think he was right this season from right when he got hurt with that sternum injury, which sounded awful, like a detached sternum. Like I've never even heard of it. And he said it was real painful, but they're not going to give you the true, depth of how painful it is because it's hockey and just, I don't know, whatever. But I'd be careful moving him, because I think he's just such an important player. I think he just controls games, and that you need guys like him to win. I mean, look at all the teams with all this high-flying offense like Toronto and Edmonton. Like that's high-end offensive talent. But come playoff time, where have those teams gone? Edmonton's won 1 playoff series with McDavid. 1. How many have they have the Leafs won with Austin Matthews, Marner, and all them? None. Pretty telling, isn't it? Not saying you can't, but you gotta have guys like Chicago Couturier.
I would agree. I've said in past episodes, to me, I mean, obviously, if you're trading for Jack Eichel, it may be a different story, but in my opinion, if you're trading Sean Couturier, it kind of signals that you're not a Stanley Cup contender for at least the next season or two. Whereas if you re-sign him, to me, as a fan, it tells me, okay, they may try to win a cup in a year or two. Because I think he's essential. If the Flyers are ever going to be a Stanley Cup contender, and last year they were. By the end of the season, they were considered a Stanley Cup contender. You need Sean Couturier to make that cup run. Without him, depending on what they do, usually if you trade the best player in a trade, you don't win that trade. So depending on what would come back, who knows. But in my opinion, if you're trading Sean Couturier, you're essentially taking yourself out of being a cup contender for at least the next couple years.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
He's a now player. If he's on the
Right.
roster, they're going for it now.
Yeah.
Because that's where he is in his career. He's their most important player outside of goaltending. So,
100%.
yeah, I think it's well said, and I think it's true. And look, if you trade him for Eichel, that's obviously different. I mean, that's a different magnitude. But if you trade him for some sort of package because for whatever reason, then yeah, to me, and again, I agree with you. Trading the best, oftentimes the team that trades the best player in the deal, you'd never get back what you give up when you give up the best player. You just don't. For all those years, people were saying, trade Giroux. I'm going, what are you going to trade him for?
Yeah.
And then, trade some of these guys now, like in the season, trade this guy. I'm like, at the deadline, people wanted Voracek trade. I'm going, okay, what team in the NHL that is going to be able to get value out of him as going all in has the cap space to avoid him, to afford him? Yeah. Not only this year, but beyond. Like you got to look at those things can't happen in season. Those are off season blockbusters, big deals, hockey trades, and they don't happen at the deadline.
Yeah, I never understood the Couturier trade thing. I'm like, if you're flat out rebuilding because the only thing that makes sense are draft picks. Jimmy, as you said, if you're trading him and you're giving up the best player, which is not the Eichel case, you'd be getting the best player. What player for player trade are you doing with Couturier? Even if it's for a defenseman, who is that? And that doesn't usually happen unless the players are like somebody's disgruntled. That's where the Laine Dubois trade comes in because both players on both sides, even Roslovic, all disgruntled players moved. Like, okay, that's a unique situation.
Headache for headache.
Exactly, but that's the only time it makes sense. They need to change the scenery, And so I broke it down in my head so many times I don't get it. And the only comparable trade I can even somewhat fathom is like
Weber and Subban.
Yeah, or Seth Jones for Johansson because of the center for a defenseman. But they were both young. They were pretty young in their career at that time. So I don't see it. I don't see it. And
I think he's going to remain here, and I think they'll extend him. So
absolutely. I don't know necessarily if he's going to really break the bank. Like, what are your thoughts on his potential future contract?
That's a great question. I mean, you got to really look at the numbers and the comparables. The top guys in a free agency class are still going to get paid, even in a dampened situation because of the cap and the lack of escalation of the cap in the next couple of years. But he's still going to get paid. I don't know what that contract looks like, but you're looking at full freight on term of at least 7 years, and I would imagine on a deal for him, I mean, you got to go probably around 8.5 for 7.
Yeah, I mean, if you move Jake, there's your money right there, essentially. I mean, even if it's Voracek, Voracek, I just said same player. Even if it's JVR, there's your money right there because we have a comment asking how we're pulling it off. There's money coming off the cap. I don't think you're giving guys like Sanheim and whoever else as much money as you think you are. And I think there's going to be so much roster movement. Maybe a TK gets moved. Maybe a Sanheim gets moved. Maybe both. I say maybe. It might be more like probably. If Fletcher needs to re-sign Couturier and add another player, I'm sure he'll find a way. And this is the offseason to see it. That's how I feel about it anyway.
Yeah, well, like that guy that asked there, No Divots X, how you paying him? Well, there's guys that are coming off the books when his deal is up, like Giroux. And Giroux's not going to get the same, if he extends, is not going to get the $8+ million pay increase. You're eventually going to have the rising cap again. And it's going to be pretty pronounced, I think, when it does happen because of the TV deals, which are more than 3 times what they were prior with NBC. And then the other part is going to be, that you're going to shed some salary and you're going to use organizational currency, again, players, prospects, picks, to be able to unload cap space. That's how you do it. And in this world with a dampened cap, to that guy's question, those elements are more valuable than ever because you either have players under restricted offers on ELCs or you have players that aren't in the NHL yet not getting paid. And so you're giving them future cap savings and they're taking on current cap problems for you. That's how you buy cap space. That's why I said the most important player in the NHL right now is cap space. I don't know what number he wears, but it's cap space. And he is glorious, So that's the most important thing right now for these GMs in this world that we live in. So, yeah, I mean, that's how you make those deals happen. Look at teams, some of these teams, how they get deals done. Like Toronto had Matthews, Marner, and they were able to bring in Tavares. You find a way to move money around. You find a way to give up some organizational assets to get people to take your headache. That's the way to do it. And there's always somebody willing to take it. There's always teams out there. Chicago was one of those teams this year, just taking on people's cap problems, and they were getting prime rate to do it. It's like, signing a mortgage agreement with a 19% interest rate. But that's how you do it.
Yeah. And that's what it's there for. And I always imagined that with Hextall. You had so many prospects. Not all of them can make the Flyers or even fit if they were all NHL players. You make trades. You move things around. You move pieces around. They're assets.
Yeah.
So
and look, the good news is this. Here's the good news about it. Is that when Chuck first came in, he didn't do that. And he still has all those assets and picks and everything. And who knew that he would get lucky and need them more than ever now, considering everything. Had he moved some of those early on and they were in this situation, you'd be going, damn, we don't have any way to buy cap space or be able to make really cool deals and really aggressive deals because we gave up some of these things before the pandemic even hit. The fact that they still have them is why you see guys like Elliot Friedman, Pierre LeBrun, Bob McKenzie, Darren Dreger all saying that if the Flyers want to get in on any player, they have what those teams want.
Wow.
So they'll be able to do anything they want to do. They'll be in any conversation for teams that are looking to trade big name talent, talent.
I hope so. It's been a while. So we had a comment, a question earlier in the show. I'll put it up now. It's a little bit too long to read, but basically it's, the organization as a whole feels different today. We've had a conversation many times the past couple shows about the Flyers organization, how it somewhat feels more corporate. It feels more like it's always been a corporation.
Well, it is.
But do you know what I mean though? Like when Snyder was around, it felt like, hey, we're all the Flyers. He
was outward facing. Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's like I see the Flyers personally. I see them more as a company. More than a hockey team, more than ever, Can you kind of touch on that a little bit, and what's your perspective there?
Well, like kind of to his question, and it's a good question. He says, the biggest thing this team needs is ownership that cares about winning and hates to lose again. Last I checked, the best way to make money in sports is to win, right? So if they're all about money, you can't be about one and not about the other. You got to be about both, because as we've seen over the last couple of years, if the team is not winning and not going to, be a player and a team that, is going to really be somebody that the NHL and the other teams need to serve notice about, then there will be empty seats, and empty seats cost dollars and concessions and parking and all that goes with it. So winning goes hand in hand with it. Do they want to win? Absolutely. Everybody wants to win. Nobody wants to lose, but are you doing what's necessary to win? And look, when Mr. Snyder was here, it was obvious, he wore his emotions on his sleeve. He was very reactionary. He was a lot like the people that sat in the bowl around his, box. And that's who he was. And it is corporately owned now, and it is different. And there is obviously a different vibe. And part of that vibe is created by the lack of success since he passed away 5 years ago. But look, I know everybody wants to win, and they got to put themselves in a position to do it. And wanting to win and saying it are one thing, but they need to make it happen, because this fan base is loyal and this fan base is dedicated. And they got to find a way to do the right things, be aggressive, cash in some of this organizational currency, and put this organization back on a path. And I think, again, I alluded to it earlier, I think it's really important for sports teams and organizations to know what they are. Like the Pittsburgh Steelers, what they are. They never deviate from their identity, their DNA, and all of those things. You always know what they are. And if you're a team, whether it's just in season or and you're not sure what you are or what you want to be, you're trying to be too many things, and by being too many things, you're not being anything. So you have to figure that out. And they want to be a team that's hard to play against. And I think they were in year one of AV. Things went clearly sideways this season. But now they got a lot of data. They know who's a part of being a team that's hard to play against with that identity. And now they know what they need to get, what they need to get rid of, and what they need to add to this roster to make sure that they're that in the long view, and not in perpetuity, but for the next, era of Flyers hockey. They need to figure that out, and they need to execute it with it in mind, top of mind all the time.
You know what scares me about what you said? It's that we all know, Flyers fans, we all know as soon as the season ends, we're counting down the days till next season starts. They're going to be in the seats. They're going to be buying merch. We're going to be doing our podcast. We're going to be paying attention to the team. Do you think they know? And this is what scares me a little bit in the offseason, because it's starting to look like maybe Fletcher was the perfect corporate hire. I don't know. I'm just giving my opinion here. But do you think they're actually going to go for it? They're just going to go, and I've seen this opinion a lot on Twitter. It's not exactly mine. Do you think they're just going to make the team just good enough to sneak into the playoffs? Or do you think they're actually going to try to go for it? Because like I said, they know fans are going to be in the seats, especially post-pandemic. Everyone's vaccinated up. They can't wait to spend money and go out and watch the Flyers. They know that they're in a win-win situation as far as fans, no?
No, I don't think they know that, because I think people, they have more options now. And, you have a team in the Sixers that is a direct competitor for them, and that's lighting the world on fire. And even before the pandemic, there was competition for the dollar. And it's not just, hey, it's full every night anymore. It's not. Games are expensive. It's not what it used to be, where you could just pick up, hey, let's get out of the game, your wife and 2 kids and get away with it. It takes a lot of planning and financial planning to do that. So I don't think that's the case. And look, I don't think they just kind of make a couple of changes here just to go to show that we made changes. They're a cap team. So if you're going to spend to the cap, you spend it wisely. You spend it right. You don't just spend to the cap to spend to the cap. We're going to spend the same amount of money no matter what on the players and everything. And I think one thing I think people overlook when they look at that is they go, well, they don't really want to win. Well, then why'd you hire AV for 5 years at $5 million per? Yeah. Like, what's the point of that? Why didn't you just hire some donkey? Or why didn't you just keep Scott Gordon as the coach and play him $1.5 million? If you didn't want to win, doesn't matter. I mean, not that Gordon wouldn't have done a good job. I think he would have. But why are you going to go all in on a coaching staff with AV at 5 times 5? There's no reason, right? But they don't want to hear that because that doesn't support their argument. Yes. If you're going out and getting AV or Bonify, they went after Joel Quenneville. They offered him more money than Florida did. I know that for a fact. I've reported it. So why did they do that? Because they didn't want to win? Come on. Yeah. That doesn't. Their actions in regards to the organization don't support it. What's happened on the ice does. I get it. And there seems like sometimes there's a lack of accountability. But that being said, their actions show you that they want to win. They did everything they could to get Quenneville. He wanted to go to Florida. All right. No taxes, live in the Sunshine State. He's older, loves to fish, all that stuff.
Like it sucks down there.
So your backup plan, you go to AV when that wasn't going to happen, and you pay him 5 times 5 and a coaching staff of assistant coaches that's making more money than probably most in the NHL. So why would you do that if you didn't want to win, if you didn't value winning? You wouldn't.
Well said.
Right?
That's true. Yep. I think they got upset with
you guys are going, shit, never thought of that.
Dude, this is stuff that we've already said, and then we have this season, and it's like making you rethink everything. It's like, oh, they do want to win. They went out and got AV, and then they go out and shit the bed for an entire year, and it's like, oh my God, we're right back where we were 2 years ago.
When you have such a bad
real quick,
this,
Jack. Let me just say something real quick. So and don't lose your thought. What happened this year and what happened the year before is interesting because were they as good as we thought they were the year before, or are they as bad as we think they are now? And the truth is they're somewhere in the middle there. They're somewhere in the middle. And they clearly need to make changes. And a recoil could be much quicker than people think. Like it looks like right now, like they're a mess. And I get why, because we just lived it and it was a mess. But you can recoil in this league very quickly. And like I said, like if you get the right top pairing defenseman, you have all these boxes to check. When you have a bunch of boxes to check and question marks, then you go, okay, then we're further away because we can't possibly solve all these problems in one offseason. And while you might not be able to solve them all, but if you solve some key ones, all of a sudden, when you get a top pairing defenseman, it slots everybody appropriately. And when they're slotted, and then all of a sudden, Sanheim and Myers look like the Sanheim and Myers 2 years ago, where I was calling them a gazelle because they covered the 200 by 85 so well, right?
I think he said that during the episode we had you on, yeah.
Yeah. And those guys look great because they were in a position to succeed. They weren't playing above their pay grade. 100%. So when you slot guys right, and one guy like a Dougie Hamilton checks 5 boxes, now all of a sudden your boxes are dwindling pretty quick, aren't they? You get a scorer. You get rid of some guys in here that aren't the right guys. That changes a lot really fast. You see it in this league every year with teams. Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
No, that was well said. I think a good parallel is kind of like the Sixers. Like a couple of years ago, they're a shot away from beating the team that won the NBA championship. They run it back with some different players with some pretty hefty salary cap that completely does not work out. They get rid of that salary cap with assets, and now they're right back to being a top team in the league. I think the Flyers, if they navigate this offseason correctly, could have a very similar bounce back after their really bad season. So to go on the whole Snyder thing is, I think what it was is there was no, and you said accountability. You can't really do too much with the players. Flat cap is a thing, but no coaches were fired. Now that's a Snyder tail sign. Things aren't going right. You're out of here. We've seen Laviolette get 3 games and be gone. I even think Hitchcock, his last season with Philly, he barely started that season. He was fired, which is a little ridiculous. It was only like not even a week into the season. I think that's what a lot of them are referring to. I would have settled potentially, and I don't know if it makes sense. Maybe it pisses off your head coach. Don't really know. A guy like mostly because I don't know how much I really liked him to begin with, and the power play has never really improved by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not saying me. I'm just the outcry of where Schneider would have done this. I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Did we freeze?
I think he did. And I was going to transition into.
Maybe he's going to come back in.
That means I win. No, I could not ask him about, and it's literally our next question. It's about Nolan Patrick and what I have in the holster.
Oh, there he is.
All right, I'm back. Sorry, my internet took a shit on me.
Where did I lose you?
You were talking about accountability, and I can't remember what else.
Okay, so essentially the Snyder we grew up with, some coach would have gotten fired.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the
give
head
you a
coach.
Body.
Yeah, Laviolette, 3 games into the season, sent Jack and Hitchcock. I would have settled, and I know the outcry, like a Terrian, because power play really has been so bad. I never really liked him all that much to begin with. I mean, Pittsburgh fired him, and then they win the cup with Balsma. So, I mean, I think because there was nothing done on that front, because of the flat cap, you can't just be trading anybody. A controllable asset to show that you care would have been to let a coach go, I guess, and not even AV, because I don't think that's fair, honestly. I think that's where a lot of that comes from. That's how I land on personally. Yeah,
and I agree. I mean, and look, the fan base is used to it, right? That's been the modus operandi. Things don't go well. It's like the movie The Unforgiven. They put Ned in a box outside the bar. And he goes, "You shot it on our man." He goes, "Well, you should have thought of that before you decided to decorate your bar with my friend." But no. Look, would the right thing have been to fire a coach? I'm not into making moves to satisfy the bloodthirst of the fan base. You know what I mean? I'm just not into doing it. I want to do the right things. So if that's if firing a guy on the coaching staff is the right thing, then do it. Yeah. But look at the year before: 7th on the power play, 7th on the PK, 7th in league scoring, top 10 in goals allowed. So did those guys forget how to coach?
Right. And it goes back to the old adage, if you listen to the fans, you'll be sitting with the fans. So I can't, yeah. So
I wanted
I
blood.
get that. You wanted blood?
Yeah, I wanted blood.
And the other thing I left out was, I think because we had such an embarrassing bad season, and in my opinion, it was worse than when we finished dead last. Because at least then we had some kind of top pick. Like this was in the blowout losses. I don't remember seeing them that many against rival teams in 06, 07. Like this was truly embarrassing and so hard to watch. So I think a lot of the hate comes from that as well. Like you needed something to fire at. Like it was ridiculous.
Yeah. Even if it was just a water boy. Just be like, guys, like this stuff can't keep going like it is. 8-0, 9 or 9-0, 8-3.
Oh, it was crazy, right? It was maddening. And the same mistakes. Yeah, same mistakes. And you look at and the reason why this was tougher maybe than 06, 07 with Hitch and they were the worst team in the league was that you expected so much more this year after the progressive step forward last year, right?
I hope this year. Yeah.
Now, the difference obviously too is this is during a pandemic. So there's that variable, which again isn't an excuse, but it's a reality. Yeah. But the other thing, when you look at it and they were too good to finish at the bottom because they got off to a good start to the season. And they battled their way back in some games that they had no business battling their way back in. The other part of it is, you look at like this year and how disappointing it was, and it stings so much. And to not have someone pay the price for what happened is where I get where the fan base goes. Like seriously, nobody's going to pay for this. They must not care. Yeah. And I think where we're going to see the price be paid is with certain players not being here. That's going to be the body.
That sounds like it has the foresight in mind to make the right decision, which is kind of what you were alluding to. So
yeah,
we'll jump off of that because there's another player I want to ask you about.
I wanted to say one thing about that real quick. You know what that told me when they didn't let anybody go? I mean, they were playing really bad up until that point, but after you lose games like that and there are no changes whatsoever, it told me that this season was going to be a mulligan. This season was, it's COVID year. How can you fire anybody during a pandemic, right? You can't. It's a shitty thing to do. Everyone's going through some BS. We're not going to get to the playoffs anyway. So what is the point of doing anything irrational? It told me that, hey, this season is what it is. 56-game season. The players are, struggling, going through it. I'm sure some of them were beat to shit. That's a question I wanted to ask you earlier. I'm sure everybody's mentally tired. Let's just get through the season. That's what that showed me as a fan. Hey, this season's a mulligan when nothing happened.
Yeah, I can get why people would feel that way. Because again, we're conditioned too to think that when something goes sideways, and it's not just with the Flyers, it's just Philadelphia sports, and it's a lot of sports cities. It's not just Philadelphia, but it's the Eagles went sideways. They clipped Doug Peterson. They sent the quarterback out of here. Things went sideways for the Sixers, like you just mentioned, Jack. Brett Brown's gone, right? Good man. Like we like Brett Brown, but it's not about liking somebody. It's about winning. Yeah. And you saw Gabe Kapler had his team, midway through seasons right in the mix, and then they ultimately faltered because the roster wasn't good enough. And boom, he's gone. So we're conditioned to have that be. We like to say, okay, there's the body. There's the guy who suffered the consequences. Yeah. And, I look at it and I go, none of those guys forgot how to coach. They did a great job the year before. And I don't want to give them a mulligan. You got to learn from it. And it certainly it's going to put everybody on notice going forward, but that this is unacceptable and it can happen again. And they got to do better. And they got to get better players in here, and I just don't want to let a lot of players off the hook anymore. I just don't. That's because frankly, there's just been. I don't want to scapegoat a coach that wasn't telling them to not flood one side of the ice in the D zone with 5 guys. Yeah. For that mistake. You know what I mean? So I'm fine with it. I thought there could have been some kind of change, and maybe there still is one to come. I don't know. With Scott Gordon and Kerry Huffman, parting ways with the organization today. We'll see where that goes and who goes down there. I mean, does a guy like Lappy go down and be the head coach down there? I'm not sure. So yeah, there's still some elements that are up in the air, I think, this offseason. But to me, it's about the mix of players, and the mix was not right this year. And if anything, our suffering taught us is that that's the case. And there's no denying it. There is no denying it anymore. We cannot deny it any longer. Yeah.
We thought we couldn't get any lower before AV was hired, but turns out, once you get your hopes up, the fall down, it hurts a little bit worse.
Yeah, that's the thing about sports, though. That's what makes it great. It tastes better.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. A couple of years ago, we didn't. I mean, I'll speak for myself, but could care less if the Flyers won or lost. It was like you were just apathetic.
Yeah.
At least now you feel something watching them, so it's good to have that again.
The other thing, to go back to that season where they were the worst team in the league with Hitch, what'd they do the next year?
Yeah,
went to a conference final. That's the recoil I'm talking about. You make some really good, smart moves. That they had more holes on that team, Jack, than a block of Swiss cheese, right? And there was no way we can fix all this. A couple savvy moves, checked multiple boxes, chemo, right? And some of those guys.
So we're making a deal with Nashville for defensemen. So that's Ryan Ellis, and we're signing the top free agent. It all makes sense. No, that was Holmgren. A lot of people hate on Holmgren. All they remember is the end. And I'm like, you remember what he did when he first took over? Like, come on.
He was fun, man. If anything, he was fun.
He was never boring, and he had a lot of success. I remember a trade that he made that pretty much single-handedly got them to a cup final. And a guy named Chris Pronger on draft night.
The best draft I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Wow.
He drafted Richards and Carter. He made at the end. Look, he got sideways because the old man was impatient.
Yes,
I
tell everybody
he didn't want to trade Bobrovsky.
Nope.
The old man demanded it. Who's the best goalie on the market? Happened to be some cosmonaut nut job.
Love them.
And Bobrovsky's like, I'm not staying here. You got this guy to this long-term deal. I'm never going to get my chance. And they got impatient. They shipped him out, and other players too. And Mr. Snyder's competitive nature wanted to win one more, but it didn't work out because you have to be a little bit patient. But there's a line between patience and being too patient. Now they got to draw that line and use those assets to flip this into an aggressive situation.
So speaking of being patient, particularly with a player, there is a question in our comments here about Nolan Patrick already being out of Philly. I'll just leave it up to you this way. What was your thoughts on Nolan Patrick's season since coming back? It's great he played a full season. -30, not that I'm a big believer in that, but when it's that big of a number and the low points and the amount of games he's played. And to be honest, I always viewed him as an asset. He was the number 2 overall pick of the draft. You can sell that, but it sounds like they'll take not much to get rid of him.
His season, obviously, it was such a unique circumstance. The guy didn't play hockey for like 18 months, right? And dealing with the migraine issue, and to come back this year, you knew it was going to take some time, and I think we were all patient with it. Like, we understood, like, hey, this guy's not going to be this polished product after missing that much time, and there's going to be some times in games and in his play where he's going to be a little reluctant and nervous, and eventually I think you saw him engaging in some contact, which was good to see. But the thing that's frustrating about Nolan is, like, you watch him in practice, or I watched him even when he wasn't playing that year, working out with Angelo Ricci, and I've talked about it. I talked about it with Ange. The skills are all there. I mean, the kid can move. He's got great hands, hockey sense. He's got everything, but he's missing one thing, and it's the thing that analytics doesn't show that we didn't see this year, was enough compete in his game to be a guy that was going to go out there and feel like he was going to do whatever it took. And he ends up with, I think, 9 points on the year, 4 goals. He played over 50 games. You alluded to the -30. He got power play time. I'm still trying to figure out why sometimes. Yeah, I mean, he was killing penalties a little bit at the end. I think they were just trying to do anything to get him jump started. And usually I'm not a guy that says give up on a guy early, and I'm not giving up on his career, but a change of scenery might be in order because something is just not working here. Even in his unique circumstance, it's just not working. And I don't know if he needs to be closer to home in Manitoba, or I don't know. And I see that the Christopher said there in the comments that an Edmonton writer said that he's all but out of Philly this summer. I don't know that. He changed agents for the third time in his 4-year career, which to me is yet another red flag. He's either getting advice, bad advice, or has gotten bad advice. I don't know. But
just as many agents as he had goals this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
The fact
and for a high pedigree hockey family,
Yes.
Yeah.
The fact that if the season was another week, Wade Allison probably would have passed him in all statistical categories. It's like, this guy was the number 2
in a tenth of the games.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you say compete. Look at Allison. My God, this is the other reason why they got to get other players out of here. And then we talked to Anthony Sanfilippo, and they're saying that they were willing to accept, like, what was the deal? Like, I don't know exactly, but it was around like a second and change. And it was like, for the number 2 overall pick of the draft, even at this point, I thought he had more value than that, which means they really are, I don't want to say done, but pretty close to done with him.
Yeah, I think that, when you change agents, a lot of times that comes with a request to be moved.
Yeah.
That could be part of what's happening here. And he's looking for a different situation. Whether it's better or not remains to be seen. But I don't think that he's a guy devoid of value, because he still is a number 2 overall pick. And here's what I know about sports and general managers and coaches. There's a lot of arrogance. And when they see talent, they say, yeah, you may not have been able to get that talent to flourish and bloom, but I can. I know how to do it. I know how to crack the code, right? We see it all the time. And sometimes some players are just mutts. Sometimes they can crack the code, and all levels in between. And with Nolan, I think there is value there. But I don't think Chuck's in a position right now where he's going to go, I'm not going to just give you away. I'm not just going to give you away. Why would I do that? If you have something that you want to give up that I need for him, then we'll have a conversation. I'm not hanging up the phone. But if you think a second round pick is going to land you a number 2 overall pick that's played 3 out of the 4 years he was available and had migraine, it's not going to happen. You're wasting my time, because there's not enough. You'd rather bring the player back and hope he figures it out over a second round pick that's got about an 8% chance to play in the league.
And I hope that's what it is, because we can't have another bust. Like, I mean,
you can.
Even Heischer signs a big deal, and I wasn't all that in love with Heischer, but like, even he's the captain now for the Devils, and it's like, we really need Patrick, and this is.
Well, you see Cale Makar and and you're like,
Pedersen, and it's just like, the one thing missing is, truthfully, what you're getting at is the care. Like, we want him to really care. We want him to really want to win and won it. Like, hasn't really made, and this is going to sound kind of jerkish, but he really hasn't made that much money compared to what he could have. And
he doesn't have FU money. I know that.
It's like, got that. If you want to just get in and get out, you're going to have to at least land one contract. So aren't you going to try for that? And it was a flat cap, and it's like a dumb reasoning, but at the same time, they're humans. Like, I don't know. The whole situation with him leaves me flabbergasted. I don't know what it's going to be. I agree with you. If you're not getting anything for him, and you're certainly not paying him, keep him around.
Keep him around, try and up his value, and then you move him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come to camp ready to play, be in shape, be ready to go. And, and if you come in and do that, and then we'll see. I'll get you out of here and use that as motivation to get him out of here.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't happen,
sides to the coin with MP, with Nolan Patrick. And that's, you guys see what's going on with Sam Bennett, right? In Florida. Mm-hmm. He's played extremely well. So I could see it already. Nolan Patrick's going to go somewhere, the place that he wants to be, and he's going to turn it on. He wants to play there. And Philly fans are going to go, oh, I told you they should have never moved them, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But here's the thing that they don't understand.
You got receipts now on Twitter, though, those people. So
yeah, it was never, ever going to happen here for Nolan Patrick. The same way, well, I'm not going to get into Ghost. So they have to remember that if they were to keep Nolan Patrick here, as opposed to him going away and succeeding somewhere else, he's not going to have that success here, because he doesn't want, just, again, my opinion, I've heard things from people, whatever. I don't think he wants to play in Philly. I don't think he wants to be here. He wants to be closer to home. When he gets to where he wants to go, he'll turn it on. And we'll see him put up, I don't know, 50 points, whatever. And we'll have people go, I told you. But it's not going to happen here.
I hope he likes Columbus.
I just got rid of him.
I hope he likes Columbus, Ohio.
I hope so. Dude, if anybody deserves Columbus, it's Nolan Patrick, man. I'm sorry. I know he's been through a lot, but based off what I've heard, he deserves Columbus.
Ancillary piece in the Seth Jones deal, boys.
It's a shame Burrell's not there
same thing
anymore.
So we're coming close to the end here. We're 20 minutes over an hour. So I know I told you an hour. Sorry about that, Jace. Thanks for hanging out. But one more question here. Antimeo. I had it kind of on my list of questions to ask too. Putting you on the spot. What player do you realistically think Fletcher will either trade for or sign via UFA this summer? Anyone that you may have heard of or really like?
Let me give you an ascending or descending list of. Okay. I'll give you 4 guys, and I hope they end up with one of these 4. There's some variables here, obviously, too. The number 1 is Dougie Hamilton if he reaches free agency.
Yeah,
that's number 1, and there's no cost per acquisition because he's a free agent, so you're not giving up anything. So that leaves you the ability to do other things and clear cap space with the other assets that you're not using for the acquisition. You're just committing cap space. So Dougie Hamilton, I'm going to just stay on this top pairing defenseman because I think it's that important. So Dougie Hamilton, number 1. If Seth Jones, and I don't believe that he will want to re-sign in Columbus, and I think he will be moved this summer. They cannot go into next season with Seth Jones if he's not re-signed. Wow. And he can't say, I don't know yet. It's got to be definitive. I think they're going to end up moving him this summer, and that is a player that I'm obviously very interested in. Both of them right shot, both of them big bodies, can play 25-plus minutes a night, power play, penalty kill. They check all the boxes. So those 2, and then I think you get into the tier below that, which would be Ryan Ellis. You're going to get in maybe Ekholm, even though he's a left shot, can play the right side. But Ryan Ellis, and then maybe even beyond that, maybe it's a David Savard for a bit of more of a Band-Aid type fix to that top pair. And, if you go with a guy like Hamilton or Seth Jones or even Ellis to some extent, that's a long-term 7-year top pairing together of Provorov and whoever one of those players is. And if you're going to solve the problem, an enormous problem, and one that is so consequential, why not solve it for the long term if you can? And if they get that opportunity, and I think they'll do everything they can to put themselves in that mix to get something like that done, I believe they will. Up front, I think it's a little different. As I mentioned, I think Jake will be in play for sure. I think he could, as I mentioned, Calgary earlier, be in some kind of deal there. I have to see what that deal looks like before I judge it. But I think JVR is another player that will be in play, not just for Seattle, but also for other trades if it's not Seattle. I think that, if you get a top pair, like those guys I mentioned, I think Ghost is likely not going to be here. But I think there's another guy that nobody's talking about, but I'm hearing some things about is Anthony DeAngelo. So drop a little bomb on here towards the end, boys. It's going to be bought out by the Rangers. The prior staff with Jeff Gordon and John Davidson was not going to buy him out. I think the Drury is going to buy him out. And he knows that he's not really in a position to garner any kind of deal with any kind of term because of his past. But he's a good player. And there's obviously other things to consider here, how outward he is politically and all those elements and the issues with teammates and those kind of things. But he's on a last chance opportunity. And could you go league minimum and get a guy like him on a 1-year prove it deal? Maybe. I don't know what Flyer fans would think of that. I think some half would think it's okay, another half wouldn't, based on political lines. But don't put that out of your head. And if that happens, remember you heard it here first.
Interesting. Sounds like you might know a little something there.
I know nothing.
There was something I wanted to touch on earlier in the show, and I'm just going to sneak it in here. So on past shows, we've been talking about Provorov, and we know didn't look like the Provorov we were expecting. How much of that goes into not having a consistent, capable defense partner? I mean, this is no offense to Justin Braun. Had a solid year by all accounts, but he's playing top pair minutes with Ivan Provorov. How much would that boost Ivan Provorov's play? You mentioned it a little earlier in the episode, to be paired up with a guy like Seth Jones, like Dougie Hamilton, like Ryan Ellis for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
It'd be everything.
Yeah.
Look, in the game of hockey, you have no time to think.
No.
You think you die. It's like a war zone, right? Not to be dramatic, but you have to know where that guy is, and you have to play with it. There has to be consistency in your pairing so that you don't have to think, oh, am I out with Ghost? Am I out with Braun? Am I out with Myers? Or am I out with Sanheim? They like to be here. I'm here. Where are they? Now I got to look. Now I'm dead. Now it's turnover. So you got to have that consistency, and you got to have a guy that plays the game at the same level that he's capable of playing it at. And like you said about Justin Braun, he's a total pro, but he's not a top pairing guy.
No.
That's a guy now you're asking to do a job that he's not equipped to handle anymore in his career at this point, north of 30. So if he's a third pair guy, he's a great third pair guy, veteran leader, penalty killer, and all those things. But if you're asking to be a top pair guy, that's almost unfair.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing you said, like, you have to have that consistency. It's like an offensive line defense, and they didn't have it, and it was juggling, and just, you had to make changes because it was so glaringly not working that you had to try something different, because if not, you're foolish for not trying something different. But then it's a vicious spin cycle of feeding itself failure. And I think that's what happened. I really do. And I think if you get him a top pairing guy, I mean, I think it fixes so many problems.
I agree.
Not just obviously in facing the opposition's top line, but it's your penalty kill. Yep. It's your power play. It's the way you control the ice. Matt Niskanen was a good player. He was not a great player. He was not Drew Doughty in his prime. That's not what they lost. What they lost was a veteran who, when the game looked like it could have gone really bad the other way, would go out and give you a really quiet shift, calm the game down, right? Sometimes it's just that one shift that nothing happens on it. But you know why that was a great shift? Because nothing happened on it. This year, those shifts where you needed nothing to happen happened.
They were giving up goals right after they scored. Yeah.
Yes. Goals for the other team.
16 times within 2 minutes, which was tied for the league lead with Edmonton. And you're not going to outscore that problem. And Edmonton did, because they got a guy named McDavid and Draisaitl. But, you need that to happen. That is so important. Like, Matt Niskanen was not a great player. He was a really good fit and everything.
Eddie, man.
But but let's not act like he was Drew Doughty in his prime, or, he is Victor Hedman. No. He ain't that. And I refuse to believe that the drop off this year was all Niskanen related because he was that great of a player. No, it was the trickle down effect of not having that, and not just what you lost in him as a player, but what you lost in him in all other elements, and asked other guys that weren't ready to do those jobs to do. Hi, honey.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to hold
she was there. I'm like, why are they looking? And I see. Say hi, babe.
Very, very
that was
well.
Too cute, man.
Exactly how I felt about Niskanen, and the idea that they could get, hopefully, a Seth Jones.
Rogan can't play D. Score.
You'd be like, don't cancel that. Seth Jones. I mean, that makes you want to cry. Like, I just think he's so good, and a guy who can calm down a shift, but also throw the body around. My God, you get me all excited over here. D'Angelo on a prove it deal. Will Twitter implode? Most likely. However, I'm all for it. This team needs so many changes.
If they got D'Angelo, it wouldn't be the top pair or anything. That would be
no. This is in addition to already getting. Yeah. Because let's be real, they need more than just a top pairing guy would do a lot. But I do think they could use a guy to play with either Myers or Sanheim. And I don't know. I could be wrong, but I feel like one of the two is going to get moved.
Yeah, and I think the guy more likely to get moved would be Phil.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah,
not Sanheim. Sanheim's year was up and down, but not as bad as some make it out to be. But he's also in a situation where he's compensating, and I think everybody in confidence just eroded, and it went through the team like a brush fire, and the poor play went through like a brush fire. And I think that's, again, I've always said it's been a confluence of many negative things to get what we saw this year.
He's another guy. If you can find him a consistent partner, I think we'll see his play elevate. Before Sanheim came up, we were told that he's this puck moving D, quick decisions, offensive guy, pushes play, and I feel like we haven't been able to see Travis Sanheim in his true nature yet. And maybe that's because he hasn't had a consistent partner. I don't know, but I think those are two of the top things on the list to actually get them defensive partners that are going to be around for the next 3, 4, 5 years, like we said.
Yep, solidify.
Solidify. So, dude, it's been an hour and a half. We could keep talking to you.
We got to.
We know you got to go. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Jace. Everybody, I'm sure everyone listening to our show knows where they can find you. But just in case, is there anything you want to promote, or where can people find you on social media?
At Jason Myrt on Twitter, JasonMyrt, and of course Flyers Daily, which we're doing 3 days a week right now. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes. Tomorrow's episode will feature the aforementioned Michel Therrien. Tells a great story about when he had Carey Price when he lost the job in Montreal, and all the way through Carey Price being the Hart Trophy winner, and how he had a chance to talk to Carter Hart about that. And we know that Carey's Carter's idol. So very interesting conversation in regards to that and a lot of other things, including the power play and all the other ancillary elements of the season. So he'll be joining us.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
All right. Parting question. Who you got winning the cup?
It's tough, man. It's really hard this year because none of these teams have
really
really played each other, right?
I told Jack I was going to do it.
He did.
Well, I'm not going to just go like chalk and go Colorado or Vegas. I'm going to go a little different here, and I'm going to say the Carolina Hurricanes.
Love it. Love the pick.
Jimmy does love that. I will back him. And they're good.
Sneaky good team.
Yeah, really, absolutely.
Yep. Rod Brindamore has been involved in, I think, 95 of the team's 106 playoff wins.
Wow.
Either a coach or a player. Yes.
Insane.
Yeah. Pretty nice.
And he's jacked.
Yes, he
is. All right. So for Christopher as well, Jason, thanks once again, brother. We're going to end the show. Always a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we don't have to wait, I don't know, what was it, a year and a half?
See you in 2023, boys. Don't don't lose my number again.
Maybe we'll be talking about a Stanley Cup. All right, that's going to do it for the episode, boys and girls. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.